Music for this episode of About to Break is provided by Cat Beach Music. Whether you're looking to score an entire film or just need to find the perfect vibe for your next commercial project, our friends Bobby and Jen Hartree have what you're looking for. Check them out today at catbeachmusic.com. A little over 3 years ago, I started this podcast called About to Break, where we talk about the ups and downs of life in the entertainment business and trying to pay the bills while doing what you love and just trying to break into an industry before it breaks you. And I got to tell you, I had no idea when I started that 3 years ago how crazy things would be today. I'm recording this on March 13th. And as you know, there's a pandemic in our country related to the coronavirus. I don't want to downplay at all the people that have been affected by this virus or infected by this virus. That is the major issue in the country right now. But secondarily, I see a lot of my friends in the creative world who are getting hit really, really hard. You know, getting messages from friends and just seeing their shows getting canceled and tours getting shut down and, people flying back home from what they thought was going to be a 6-month gig that was going to pay their bills for the next year. And Katie and I were struggling as well. You know, we've had 3 emails today that basically equate to 2 months worth of money coming in, getting canceled. And I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm setting something up here. It's really tough when the people who are usually the ones bringing us joy and bringing us respite and getting us, to have an escape from the craziness in our life, when the creative artists get hit, the temptation is going to be to go in your shell and to hide and to just say, well, I can't be creative right now. And my challenge to you is let's not stop creating. Let's not stop telling jokes. Let's not stop performing magic tricks. Let's not stop sharing our art and sharing our story, because the world, more than ever right now, they need it. So I haven't posted in a little while here. I was taking a break because I was working on some projects. It's interesting how when this happened, the things that were the biggest deal to you 2 weeks ago, you're not even thinking about right now. Isn't that crazy? At least for me. I don't know your situation, but for me, it's like things that were these major, almost crises, seemed so insignificant compared to what we're dealing with right now. So, honestly, I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so the first thing I'm going to do is record one of these conversations, because, the thing that has got me through some of the toughest times in the last 6 years of my life has been these conversations I've had with other entertainers in green rooms, where you hear great stories and you also hear the challenging stuff that makes you feel like you're not alone. So that's what we're going to do today. My guest today on the show has been someone I've wanted on this program for the last couple years. We've been trying to do it. Both of our tour schedules have been crazy, but lucky for everyone else, we surprisingly woke up to our schedules being wide open, and he reached out to me and said, let's do this. So today on the program, we have Pat Hazell. Pat's an amazing comedian and author, writer. He was a comedy writer for Seinfeld. He's a Tonight Show veteran. Showtime called him one of the top 5 funniest people in America. He has a company called Sweetwood Creative, of which he's the chief creative officer. And with that company, he's put together Pat Hazell's permanent record that is going to be touring here in just a little bit. The Wonder Bread Years, The Good Humor Man, My Funny Valentine. He's done so much, and I'm so excited to have him here. Would you please welcome Mr. Pat Hazell?
Wait. Here.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Something is about to break.
Pat, thank you for being on the show.
It is my pleasure, Taylor. This is something to do.
Yeah. All of a sudden, our very busy schedules became a little less busy.
Yeah, I don't know who's booking all the Purell parties and the, pandemic, panic parties and stuff.
Right. I can't wait till we're on a completely barter system where we're swapping Purell for toilet paper and all that. It seems like it's coming.
Not too far from it, friend.
Yeah. Now you're in Austin, is that right? Austin, Texas?
That's right, Austin, Texas.
Great, and I'm here in just east of Los Angeles, and so it's pretty crazy there too, where you're at, huh?
Yeah, you know what? There's an interesting process. I think it's still on the early verge of the tipping point. I mean, you see some grocery store overbuying and that kind of thing, but I think that we're all in for a little bit of a change in how we look at the world and how we interface with each other. So I think people are sort of still treating it as, is it funny? Is it fake? What is this thing? But, it's clear that it's run rampant with the sports world and Disneyland. And, in terms of how we have to interface with it, I think we have to take it very seriously. Not so much the virus itself, but the human condition and how people respond to it.
Yeah, indeed. And especially in our world, the live performance event theater world, we're usually the ones who joke about these sort of things. And not a lot of my friends are joking right now.
Right. Well, listen, we're in the gathering people business. Yeah. Right. That's what we're doing with community of having an audience. And we're in the travel business. We're going to places. Right. I think people are going to have to start to look. They're going to have to localize their sense of how they work. And probably, this is a insider's tip. Yeah. The first thing I would do is I would not look at it as a selfish approach to how do I sell a show, right? And more how do I heal a community. So if you're a singer-songwriter, if you're a comedian or whatever, I wouldn't go chasing around saying, where's the money? I would say, can I do something for this venue? Maybe we can co-produce something on a percentage, but more importantly, give people an inspired place to come together, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a reward in being proactive about the what can you give versus what can you take.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. A couple of years ago, I had a friend who really challenged me with that idea in general with shows where you're not going on stage thinking, what can I take from these people as far as like a laugh or a reaction, but can I give them an opportunity to experience something? And that for me has been kind of a mind shift over the last couple of years, but even more so now, like you're saying with, what can we do as entertainers? In times of crisis, people come together and go, hey, here's what I got that I can give. Well, we can give a little joy and a little laughter and a little respite in the time that's kind of crazy right now.
It's important because fear travels so much faster than hope, and it runs away from us, right? Right. So, if you hear an inspirational song, if you see a poem, if somebody does something that moves you, it makes a great impact in that sort of, basically small things are casting big shadows at the moment, right?
Right.
So it's about putting the light in the right spot,
Right.
And I don't know, all my career, I enjoyed entertaining, I enjoyed writing and putting on plays. And, there's some vanity in it for all of us, a little bit of ego and that kind of thing. But I think I learned the most this year. I wrote a new piece called Pat Hazell's Permanent Record, and I decided I was going to reflect on everything I did wrong growing up that should have kept me out of the business and so forth, right? And it was comedic in nature when I started, right, which was to say we all have a record. There's things we're ashamed of or we're hiding of or we wish people don't know about us and so forth. And mine was thin, but I thought it was a good way in the door. And then it changed dramatically when I hired a political opposition research company to look into me. I said, wow. I want you guys to expose me, so I have to...
like to go through your past and see what they could dig up?
Right. And how would I defend it? So the premise of the show became much more real and cathartic. And I'm not even saying that so much crazy stuff came up, but they gave me a pretty big... binder full of stuff that I was like, what is this? Where did you get this stuff? And it was from the smallest little thing, and they knew, I specifically told them what the project was. And I said, I'm just curious, what pictures will they come up with? They read all your Facebook posts. They go, they watch videos, TV appearances, listen to radio. Their job is as if I was running against their candidate or something.
Right. Yeah.
And
like
so
you funded your own smear campaign.
I totally did. It was interesting because they were very cool people. But I premiered it. It had its world premiere in Des Moines, Iowa, in December, and I did I remember 25 shows or something, all in one place, so I could get the show rolling and all of that. But they knew that, and so one of the things that popped up was an article from 32 years ago where I had insulted the city of Des Moines or something. And I was like,
and that's where the show's at?
Yeah. So they thought that was funny, right? So it was from the days that I was in LA and I was opening an improv in Orange County or doing something. And the interviewer asked me, I don't know, some question where I said, no. I'm doing all my A-list material here. you save that B-list for when you're in a town like Des Moines or something. It was just an offhanded grab
something that you didn't even think. Yeah.
Well, and again, it's not the end of the world for smear campaigns, right? But it was hilarious because I chose, in the process of wanting to educate people about what it was like to have an opposition research company look into you, I videotaped all the questioning, the delivery of the material, all of those things so that I could write about emotionally what happened there, what am I doing, right? Yeah. So I was able to use some of those clips and put them right in the show. So that was one I put in the show in Des Moines.
Oh, that's great.
Where when the insult was read by the guy, the crowd was like, "Ooh." And I said, "Well, what do I do about it?" I treated it like it was the biggest thing in the world,
the biggest scandal ever.
I said, "Well, you have to hire a what do they have me hire? A communication strategist."
Okay.
So I hired a guy to talk about how do we deal with these problems, and because he was on salary, he treated it very seriously, and he's like, "Well, here are your options. You directly apologize to the people of Des Moines and with some sincerity, or you get a surrogate and somebody comes in that's high enough level, that has enough clout that they believe them, and you have them speak on your behalf." So that, listen, when I develop new material, I let the story tell me where it wants to go, right?
Oh, that's so good.
So at that moment, I put an apology in the show, but I then in turn went out and looked for surrogates, and I got the actor George Hamilton does an apology for me, a big sort of heavy-handed, almost like he's the most interesting man in the world, whatever that is.
Right, yeah.
In a really nice Hollywood, Beverly Hills location and whatever. And then he does a really good job. And then he goes, "Am I saying this kid's name right?" As if he was paid to do it.
Right.
And subsequently, a number of other people stepped up. Kevin Nealon, comedian, and Steve Higgins, who's a Tonight Show sidekick or whatever. So sprinkled throughout the show is one person after the other apologizing to Des Moines.
Oh, that is so
saying,
great.
"Look, he's not that bad of a guy. He's from Nebraska. What does he know?" Like, they're insulting me. And I have to say, look, if there's anything to learn from it in terms of our peers, it's that the solution to the problem is built into the riddle, right? So when you're developing new content, instead of predetermining where it's going, realize that you're sitting down to take dictation for the story.
Oh, that's so good.
The story can take you places, and if you shut it off, you lose an opportunity. One of the cool things that happened in there was, some of the stuff I said, I didn't do this. This never happened. And the guy goes, "Well, wait a minute. This is Pat Hazell in Iowa." I go, "Yeah, that's not me." They found a number of other Pat Hazells, but there was one that had the same middle name as me, right? Patrick James Hazell. And he was the godfather of Iowa blues. And he's a musician that has all kinds of albums and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, oh, this is great. I'll call this guy. And I asked him if he would write the theme song for the show.
Yeah.
And I put it mainly because I thought it would be funny to have two Pat Hazell bios in the program and confuse people.
Right. It's also kind of fun that music is also by Pat Hazell. Everyone's like, "Oh, wow."
Exactly. Right. Okay. So here's the funny thing. The guy was very, very generous, and really he did all the interstitial music and the music beds and all that. But when I was talking to him, he said, "Well, why should I do it?" I said, "Well, it's called Pat Hazell's Permanent Record. Your name's going to get, soiled regardless. If you want to make it better, maybe the music will help."
That's so funny.
And so he wrote some cool stuff, and he came to the opening night with his wife. And, then he afterwards, he asked me, would I come back to Iowa sometime so we could do a show together? Because he said it'd be fun. Pat Hazell opening for Pat Hazell, So, something new came out of it, a new friendship,
a new
avenue, something kooky,
Well, it's so great to approach the creative process like that, where you don't go, this is what, you come up with the end in mind, and then you try to force it to happen. I love that approach of letting the story speak to you, and you're just dictating, writing it down.
Yeah. I mean, it is, there's a lot of trust in it. Right. And sometimes you wallow through looking at blank pages and deciding what to do next. And it can be frustrating, but also once it starts to take a track, and there's an aha in it, right? Yeah. Then you can chase it really fast. It's everything speeds up. It really, I think for me, this particular story accelerated after my dad had passed, and I didn't know what the show was about. I thought it was about me. And then it occurred to me that it was really about every man where you can be knocked off your pedestal in 48 hours and then people can put a story up about you and then you have to try to defend it and all of that kind of stuff. So people watch this show and laugh a lot. And then the mirror goes up and they realize, oh, wait a minute, this can happen to me. And then they go into kind of a concerned area. And look, you can't define yourself by something you did when you were 12, but you can correct the path, right? The ending of the story isn't finished being written. So you get to determine whether you're the, hero or the bad guy at the end of your life, and look, today more than ever, being proactive about what's right in front of you. What are you doing in the present? What is it? Whether it's a service related or community related or whatever. What action are you taking? And are you building something up or tearing something down? Right?
Yeah.
It's that much of a moment. There's neutral only lasts for a second, but either you're making something better or you're making something worse. Right?
Oh, that's so good.
I feel like this conversation for me is making things better, right? I would have had an empty plate this afternoon. When you said, should we talk? I was like, fantastic, right? We had been trying to do this other times and my schedule was so busy that I couldn't wrap my head around it,
Yep.
But many artists, many friends that do different things, they're playwriters, they're songwriters, they're, orchestra leaders, they're whatever. In the last few days, the conversation is very, very concerning, and they don't understand that the artist voice, we have a gift not just to give, but that other people don't have. The person who works in the factory that closes down doesn't get to do factory stuff in their house when they're done. But the person that can pick the guitar up or who can write about what emotionally they're feeling and connect to other people can, they can save the day and, for themselves and then consequently the vicarious. I think that people are going to find more and more inspiration in people that are able to sort of lift their head up and not define themselves by their stock dropping. And, it's hard because that's the first thing you do is go, oh, how do I make ends meet?
Right.
But it's happening to everybody at once. So,
Yeah, I was talking to a friend yesterday and we had the same conversation about we may be in a tough spot, but we have resources at our disposal and abilities at our disposal that someone who just works for a company and that company shuts down for a little bit is just out of luck.
Right. Totally out of luck. Right. So, it almost sounds like a inspirational speech, but if you really look at the stuff that you have at your fingertips and even relationships that you can talk to people or you can do whatever, most of it is no longer the material things sitting in front of you, right? It's not your set of golf clubs. It's not the concert tickets. It's not the location. Those are all fantastic places to go and celebrate and have a great time. But, literally walking out of your house, right, and turning the news off for a couple of hours and walking in nature and taking a deep breath and seeing an animal or doing whatever, you begin. It's certain that the sky is not falling, right?
Yeah.
But if you leave on the news 24/7, you flip from channel to channel, and I'm not even saying that they're fabricating it or whatever. There's no import in the comment other than, it's changing every half hour, and we can't get ahead of it, right?
Right.
And so, I think the idea is take control of the things you can take control of, right? And that is the very smallest thing, right? I read somebody's book some years ago, or whatever. You make your bed when you get up, right? Mm-hmm. That you've already started on doing something, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do that, you might lay in it depressed all day, right? So, anything like my morning today was pretty errand filled, but I felt like it's a different way of paying down debt, right? So if I don't leave dirty dishes and if I don't, if I do my laundry and whatever, I'm not a clean freak, but I feel like, okay, I'm taking care of things for my kids and for whatever that are not putting me deeper in debt. Like I'm not going to have more dishes tomorrow and more whatever if I stay on that curve, right? So, I believe it's the same with social interaction.
Right.
If you go on Facebook and you spend your time lamenting and complaining and poking fun and like, politically being divisive versus stopping and writing one thank you note or an email to somebody who impacted you or mentored you and say, my world is better because of you. That energy is, it's not for naught. You know what I mean? It's a really good thing, and everybody needs a cheerleader. Everybody needs a morale booster shot.
Right.
And, it doesn't just come from ordering something on Amazon or whatever. It's we're kind of back to the basics of human to human, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's something that is always beneficial. It's never you're never losing something by giving someone some encouragement or a little bit of hope or just a kind word. But in moments like this, it's almost exponential what it does. I've had a few friends say things that have encouraged me, and I read a post that you shared on Facebook, and those 2 or 3 or 4 days ago might have just been like, oh, that's a nice post, but in a moment like this, it can be oxygen to people. So
right, that's a good one. We need a big gust of wind in our sails.
Yes,
this is going to be a little bit longer than people can imagine. I think I'm not even a fatalist on any of it. I just know that what happens is that there's a momentum. There's a role in the cancellation.
Yep.
And I think the behavior of, let's say, corporate America and whatever, once they see that having people work from home for a few months saves them money, their attitude will be, wait a minute, why don't we just have our stock go up by not rebuilding our campus for that? You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
There's ways that this will change, that we will look back and go, geez, again, regardless of what the results are or how many people are tested or survive or don't, we're I think in a time where we have to take stake in who we are personally, who's around us, maintaining some positive, life raft to stay afloat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All those things we love that we do, working at comedy clubs or doing any of that kind of stuff, it impacts every part of every industry. So the waitress there, the food service person there, all of that. And if the patron themselves are not working, they can't spend the money, So pick any industry and throw this on it. I don't know enough historically, but it probably has been since like the Spanish flu, since something was so globally, impactful. Yeah. And this one is compounded by some miscommunication in leadership and by, a changing tide in politics where people they've already picked sides and they're already in place of not liking each other.
Right.
So, add hoarding or greed or any of that kind of stuff to it. And it's a hotbed, you couldn't imagine a civilization would take this turn, but I'm telling you, what's a week from now or a month from now look like? If there's not a plan or if there's not a turn in events, if it stays open without a sense of some closure, like, you start to see a change in, let's say, the beginning cities, the Seattle or New York or something where the first cases were, if we start to see a downturn, people can say to themselves, oh, okay, well, maybe it's the gestation on this is 4 weeks or like, without that, it's, it's, you put a couple of drops of red food coloring in water and it all goes red. There's no turning back, So I know I probably sound like I don't. I mean, I'm happy in a strange way to take a breather.
Yeah.
And to take stake into some important people in my life, and but it's a drag. It's a drag for the kids that have spring break planned. It's great. Almost all the colleges have just gone to online learning. So today might have been the last day of class for their season, for their senior year, for their freshman year.
Right. Think about all those non-tech savvy professors who are having to figure out computers for the first time.
Yeah, those guys they're as good as done.
Yeah, I've had tenure since the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm going to get the Dead Sea Scrolls out of the vault. Yeah. No, I don't. I'm not very tech savvy myself, but I will say, anybody that may already have a home garden or, there's some people that are ahead of us,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny. My father-in-law for years has been like freeze drying, things, and he's got these sealers that he seals up like 20-pound bags of rice, and every time he comes over, he's bringing us this stuff, and we're all like, "What is this for?" Now we're like, "Oh, I'm glad we got that."
I know. It's like anybody with a root cellar that's ever been made fun of is now
right,
full of pickles and jam, and
Yeah, those are going to be the popular folks. Those and the people with the nice wine cellars, I think. Those will be
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. They won't care as much, but
no, they're good. They'll wake up on the other end of it.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, when you started this project and you started examining like your life stories from, childhood and adolescence, do you come to kind of a different conclusion about how you viewed those different times in your life, having seen them through, like adult eyes?
Well, it wasn't so much being adult, because oftentimes, whatever picture we look at or Kodachrome slide, we begin to tell a story to ourselves that we retell that may or may not have been, clearly the event.
Right.
What I was learning was I was willing to get other people to tell their perspective of the story. That was what was the most interesting, right? Because I would go down a path and then they would say, "Oh, we found this information." Kind of one of the humorous things that happened. I was immediate neighbors with actress Terry Hatcher in LA when I first moved there. And she was like a young actress on the Love Boat and had a couple of small parts and stuff. This preceded Superman and the Desperate Housewives and all that goodness, right?
Right.
So anyway, in the different sections that popped up, one of the things they said is it was love life. And I go, "Oh, what are you looking at my love life for?" And they go, "Well, typically with a politician or senator or whatever, that might be a downfall if they had an affair or, something." So I'm like, "Well, what did you find? There can't be very much there." And the headline for them was longtime bachelor Pat Hazell, after dating the likes of celebrity Terry Hatcher, went on to marry or whatever. I go, what are you talking about? I didn't date Terry Hatcher. And they said, "No, we found 3 articles." And I go, "What are you talking about?" Right. So I said, "I know Terry. We were neighbors and certainly we were friends." But anyway, I said, "What was the source?" And they brought up the source, and it was the same person in all 3 stories, in different stories. And it was a guy I went to high school with in Omaha, Nebraska, who was talking about his own career and was somewhat inflating a visit out to LA and, about the times when Pat was dating Terry and we all hung out and, and it was interesting. Right. And he really went for it in those stories, and they were many, many years old.
Right.
But I looked at it and I go, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to send a camera crew to go interview that guy because he knows me and I know him about our early days in comedy. And then I'm going to have him drop the question in, tell us about when the times when Pat was dating Terry Hatcher." And I'm going to not so much trap him, but I'm going to see whether he owns it or if he doubles down, right? And I wasn't at the interview. I just sent them a list of questions, and I slipped that one in. And the interviewer knew what I was going for. So when they asked that, he started to double down. He had this big story.
Oh, really?
So they started to ask more probing questions.
He's told these stories, Pat, at every party for the last 15 years.
Right. And here's the thing. He's a funny guy. I did know him. He was in a comedy troupe. He has a tendency to be an exaggerator and a bigger-than-life character in his storytelling. Yeah. So he did not disappoint. I can tell you that. And then the interviewer said, "Oh, what does Terry Hatcher think about that?" And he proceeded to answer as if he knew. He go, "Well, she hasn't really chimed in on this subject because, whatever reason," as if they were somehow intimate in the conversation.
Right.
But when I saw those clips, I said, "Oh, I'm sending the camera to go talk to Terry and get her point." And then I'm going to intermix these 2 things where he keeps saying,
"Oh, that's
they
great.
dated. They dated. I know they dated." And she's saying, "We didn't date. I never dated." Anyway, it's a really funny sequence because eventually Terry starts to break down and she's like, "Well, not date. I mean, I think we were naked one time, not totally naked, but, I mean, we were in bed, but we didn't do it. I know we didn't do it." But, so it was really hilarious because she sort of, ratted herself out.
Right. Oh,
and
that's
then,
hilarious.
And then they interviewed me also independently, all separately, Yeah. And I was in a strange way, protective of our friendship and other things. But I said, well, I don't. She was with me when I was interviewed, and she had already said her thing.
Right.
And she sort of whispers on camera, I told him about that time that we were, naked and whatever. And I look at her kind of puzzled, and she goes, no, not that time. The other time. I mean, it was hilarious. The other time. I'm
great.
Like, oh my God. So I thought, this is all so real and authentic. I'm going to drop this in. I mean, there was never any kind of formal long-term relationship or anything else, but she might have been 21 and I was 23. And you know what I mean? And there was no controversy, but it became a really great unwinding and unraveling thing.
That's
that the
so
audience
fantastic.
could see that there was some fun and some general affection as friends and stuff.
Hey friends, I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Pat Hazell. More with him in just a moment. I want to take a moment and thank everyone who's been supporting us over on Patreon. Patreon's this great website where you can go and you can support for $2 a month, $3 a month, $5, $10, whatever you can do. We put out this content and maybe you enjoy it and you like that it's free and you want to help us keep being able to produce it. All you got to do is kick in a couple bucks and you can be a producer of the show. We are so grateful to you. We'll add in some more extra bonus content for those of you who support on Patreon. And if a monthly thing is not something you can do, if you want to just do a one-time donation, feel free to Venmo over at I'm Taylor Hughes. That's right. I am Taylor Hughes over on Venmo. Thank you so much to everyone who's supporting the show. Let's get back to it. More great stuff with Mr. Pat Hazell. Well, and with that kind of nostalgia, I'm sure people walk away from that show re-examining their own experiences. And, I don't know if anyone's come up to you and shared how it...
Well, no, they often do. They often do. They want to revisit their own slide collection or whatever. I think the most moving part for me was my dad had passed from Alzheimer's and dementia, really as an older man. And, when I turned the story to the fact that we watched his permanent record was erased while he was still alive. He no longer recognized his children or his spouse and whatever. It was a very, it was a story I couldn't tell without crying every night.
Yeah.
And it was the people who had someone in their life that had Alzheimer's or whatever, who could relate to that situation. That my dad was an amazing storyteller and he couldn't bring any details back. And you know what I mean? It was a really,
yeah.
The only thing, there's so many little things in this story about my mom making us sign our organ donor cards and all that people laugh about and don't know in the story construction that the only thing in the end that had legacy was the fact that my dad had signed the organ donor card and he had, his teeth went on to the Creighton Dental School and whatever. And so he's still having an impact today, 2 years after he passed. And that's kind of, if there's a message in permanent record or even in a message in why are we making the art, it really isn't going to be, if you do it right, it's not just for the applause or the paycheck, right?
Right.
It's there's something much longer lasting and deeper in art, even art that's process art, that's just made on the fly. There's a lot that comes out of it. I'm currently inspired by an artist in Des Moines and so forth. And her work is she's not worried about the end results. It's about your head to hand communication and being in listening to music and making the paint flow. There's some healing in all of that, I think it's becoming more and more relevant because I think we can't hide behind our cell phone,
Yeah. Yeah. And now, everybody is just kind of forced into this state of self-reflection. And, for years I've heard talk of friends that are like, I really think I need to start, slowing down and meditate more and spend more time with the family. And it's like, well, here you go.
Yep.
Overnight, all of us schedule clear.
You got your wish, right? So now the question is, do you wallow?
Right.
Or do you kind of, I don't know. I just think that there's the evaluation, the reflection is a very funny thing too. When I wrote during the summer about that stuff, it was torture because I was like, what do I tell people? Do I tell them the truth? Do I, whatever, right? How much truth? Do I say if I tell this story, which is fine or funny, is that something I want my kids to hear? Is that something I want to show up on YouTube?
Right.
Real art sometimes is painful, and yeah, you got to do that. But other times you have to say, am I revisiting a problem? Am I picking a scab?
Right,
am I creating
yeah.
something that was bad a long time ago that I've recovered from, or you don't need to hear? Is ego or vanity?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you're super cool for being super confessional? Those are checks and balances. But I think most importantly, I was able to see each of those things and say, oh, maybe before I talk about this, I owe somebody an apology. And it was more making the apology that I needed to do than telling the story, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of cleaning up who you are, it's not about scrubbing it off of the web,
Right.
It's just about, resolution, But
that's so
can I tell you that the reward in all of it, and this is the most interesting for anybody that performs in any way.
Yeah.
If you're, if you have a tinge of, I hope I do well, or you get anxious, or you're doing new material and you're nervous. Once you do this kind of thing, every night I told those stories.
Right.
I couldn't have cared less what anybody thought about me, right? I had a story to tell,
Right.
and I was going to tell the story. And if I had a decent house, if I had 300 people, they laughed, they cried, it was all whatever. If there were 19 people, it was the same experience.
Right.
And I also had never, all my years, I had, you figure out how to manage your concern about nerves or whatever, but I had never just taken the stage and not be thinking about how many people are out there. I hope they like it, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I did 25 shows in a row where I was like, this is the most relaxing, to be genuine.
Right.
Is something where, hey, I don't care. The premise of this show is I probably was an asshole at some point, right? Not wanting to be liked or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You don't like me? Then I'm telling the truth, or whatever.
Gosh.
And it's more just self-ownership. That's all, I don't know that, I still don't get anxious about something new I write or whatever, but that was sort of like, it just I let my guard down and I let it fly, and it was great.
What a great space to be in as an artist. I mean, when did was there a shift in your life where that happened, where all of a sudden you weren't as concerned with what people thought? I know that's a major thing
comes with age, but in this particular case, I was a wreck on the first night. Like I was telling the story and memorized all the stuff and whatever, and I cared so much that they liked me. And it was a little too long. The show was a little, they didn't lose interest. There was an intermission in it, and I hated the intermission. And then literally that night, I did a major surgery. I cut 15 or 20 minutes out of the show.
Yeah.
I shortened it up, made it in the 85-minute range or something. And it was like serene, right? So it's kind of, for an analogy, you look up and you think that hot air balloon, is moving pretty fast and whatever, but they can't feel it. When you're in it, you move with the wind, and it's just stillness, right? It's just peaceful, right?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what that became after the second night, was like, by taking out stuff that wasn't on story, that wasn't relevant, that I might have been doing to try to get an extra laugh or to have an insurance policy, or, when I was trying to build something for people to like, I was desperate to appeal to them. Yeah. But when I said, let the story, what in this story is the connective tissue? It's my dad, and I wanted to be a father like my dad, and I wanted to be, an honest, forthright man with my sons, and I wanted whatever. And it sounds like, that might be syrupy or whatever, but the truth was, it was the tent pole that held the whole circus up,
Right.
And so if I honored that, everything was fine. And it's different for different stories. I think in playwriting and movie making and whatever, a universal theme will often tell you what to leave behind. What is the story about? Is it about, brothers can be friends? Is it about, love is forever? Whatever it is, support that theme, and don't try to do everything. Don't take everything you own and throw it in the wagon.
Yeah, that's so much. I taped a special recently, and so much of the night was not trying to just do everything I had, hoping that one of them would stick. It's
Right.
it's taking it out, and then even as we've been in post production, I've cut out like 2 full routines because it was just like this doesn't. This stuff is great, but it's not what needs to be part of the whole story.
That's great. That's super mature. I mean, I think people have a hard time giving up their babies,
Yeah. Well, and then you just go, well, maybe this baby's going to show up somewhere else down the road. It's, but
I learned that. I learned that from early on doing some Tonight Show monologues and so forth. The first one, you're in the zone. You're doing your opener. You know what's happening. You're going to call back. You're going to close with this big thing. When they say you get to do it again, you go, what do I do for an opener? What do I do? Like, you gotta, every time you come on there, you gotta have an opener. You gotta have a closer. You gotta have a couple of callbacks. And you have to treat them like they're the most precious gems. Like, you can't go, hey everybody, here's another twist on my first opening joke.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a thing too. Like, even now I'm like, okay, I'm working on a new hour, and man, it's so hard to like go up and do stuff when you go like, okay, the purpose of me going up at this place tonight is to work out new material, and the temptation to just do what works is always there.
It's always there, right? But I think the thing is, when you go to process, when you go, no, I can't do it. I can't even I can't even introduce myself in a way that's going to allow them to whatever, because it'll take you over, right?
Right.
Then you're like, oh, well, what are a few more transitional old things where you learn cliff diving by diving off cliffs. You don't get to
that's so good.
pick it out or talk about it. And the ones that jump and survive are cliff divers. The ones that go, well, I'm going to take this and I'll carry this stuff with me. They don't, it is a leap. And look, the further you get into this, sometimes the harder it is, because you've already got your solid headlining closing act. You've already got your keynote speech, right?
Right.
So, you start to get a little bit insecure about starting over. But I'm telling you, it'll always pay off to have a challenge.
Yeah, that's so good.
In fact, in the magic business, I know all your listeners aren't magicians, but the premise, the one ahead card trick, which is a pretty basic thing you learn when you're a kid, of having one piece of information more than the audience, right?
Right.
And it feels like a miracle. That to me is the artistic carrot for anybody. Be working on the one project ahead, so that if you're in something that you're not thrilled with, or you're doing something for money or whatever, you're building that other thing you're passionate about, right? And when that comes to fruition, when your special is done and put to bed, what are you going to do? You don't want to wake up the next day and go, I got nothing.
Right.
You want to already be partly on the path to where the next destination is.
Yeah, that's so good. I was so encouraged, Pat, when I saw maybe 2 years ago at Magic Live, you hosted, and just, it was amazing. It was my first time ever seeing you live. And then I went back and, watched everything that was ever on the internet. And,
that's very scary.
No. But I was so encouraged, like, to see how much you have created, and that you're constantly creating and writing new shows and productions. One of my big challenges in magic is some of the people that I loved when I was a kid never created anything different. Like, if you go to the castle tonight, you're going to see them do the same 12 minutes.
Yeah, I know. And they're so amazing. At the time you saw them, so amazing. Yeah.
Right. And so that's been a thing personally that's kind of been it scares me. I don't want to ever be the person that stopped creating. And so I want to ask you something along creativity, because right now, a lot of us have extra time, and people are going to be, needing to create, but maybe getting in their head and feeling like I'm not inspired, or I'm not, I don't have the inspiration right now, or, the muse, or whatever it is. But you spent so much time as a TV writer and writing for Seinfeld, and I'm sure there were days you came into the writer's room and weren't feeling it, or had something bad happen the day before. What do you do to get yourself in a mindset where it's like, okay, I'm going to create on demand regardless of how I'm feeling?
Right. Well, one of the things, at least for me, is that you have to have a perspective of abundance, right? There has to be a bounty that there is something in the well, right?
Right.
If you think the well is dry, it's going to be dry, But also, I don't know what I chatted about at Magic Live or any of those places, but there's a concept called fishing the birds that fishermen use, and instead of looking down out of the boat for fish and trying to figure out where they are and dropping your line and pulling them up, whatever, they look to the sky, right? And they see where the birds are circling, and they might be a little ways away, but those birds can see, and they're going to dive in the water. Like, that will lead you to the fish.
Oh, that's
right?
good.
So I only use it as an analogy to say that it isn't always what is in front of you in the place you are or on the project you're at, right? So, if that means go to a museum, or if that means ride a horse for the first time, whatever it is, oftentimes the creator, the process is about observation. It's about research. It's about a lot of things.
Right.
So if you have interest in other things, that has some value, right? Because there's contemplation. Creativity is broken down into just a handful of things that you really need. And some of them are basic, a space to do it in, right? If you're a dancer, just having the freedom to be able to leap and whatever. If you're a writer, a quiet space where other people aren't, or if you're a person that needs chaos and you can do it in a coffee shop, good for you. But a dedicated space, right?
Right.
A dedicated amount of time. You can't just walk in and out of a thing and buy it, like you can at a magic shop.
Right.
If you're going to make something original, you need some period of time. So if you dedicate, if it's daily, if it's Saturdays, if it's whatever, if you invest in that time, there's another kind of time that you need, and that's the incubation period. We talked about a muse. So how do you let that breathe? How do you let the idea wash over you? How do you look at it from one angle or the other? You need some kind of an idea, right? Some inspired thing. And if that comes from a deadline, if that comes from being prompted by a venue or a community or a historical event or something, there's kind of no holds bar on all of that kind of stuff. And then you need like a certain amount of dedication. So the dedication is that you have to trust the process, that you will push through a block, The idea of not doing anything that's the firewall.
Right.
Doing bad things is not doing anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
I want to say Leonard Bernstein, somebody I heard say one time, who's written so much great music, that he gets up in the morning, first thing, he writes 3 bad songs to get them out of the way. And you know what I mean?
That's great. I love that.
You've gotta be doing this shit. You gotta clear out the, cobwebs sometimes,
right.
So there are many people I know that are great. They're dedicated writer. They write a certain amount of words or a certain amount of pages every day. Yeah. And if it takes the left and goes the wrong way, it isn't wrong, right? They might not even use that day's pages, but they're capable of sitting down from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and knocking out 1,000 words or 5,000 words or whatever their thing is, whatever they do. Yeah. And it becomes about the routine, just as any form of exercise does, which is you're developing a muscle, a habit that, if you're a person that goes for a hike every day or whatever, and then that gets your, mojo going, go write it down. But I think that, where it gets away from is people, they try to keep things in their head. They always think, oh, I got this great idea. It's like, well, show it to me. Well, it's all up here, right? I got a screenplay. Right. It's all written in my head. That's not a screenplay, by the way. That's an idea. And that idea is ethereal, and it goes when you go. If it's a screenplay, then hand me the manuscript and let me read it.
Yeah, that's so good.
So we have a tendency, I think, to be self-sabotaging. Everybody, not just artists or writers, that human beings will always take the easy path.
Right.
They'll go to the party. They'll do something. They'll fudge it if they have to get it done quickly. Whatever. But I don't know. I guess the thing is bounty, abundance to me. Trusting that if you're an artist, make art. Right. Yeah. I often say to like masterclass people or whatever, I'll say, finish the sentence. A writer is somebody who, and they'll say all kinds of things. And right. Many of them are true things.
Right.
And then I always say a writer is somebody who wrote today.
Right.
Because that's what makes the thing get written.
Yeah.
And I believe me, I've thrown out as much shit as I've kept in my lifetime.
My buddy Eddie.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, my buddy Eddie constantly says, "Done is better than good." Like, you just finish it. Just do something.
Right.
You can, write 1,000 shitty words, and you can make them better tomorrow. Like,
right. Yeah. It is. I became a finisher late in my life. I would say halfway into my life. I realized I had so many interests, right? So many different things, books on every topic, right? And I love diving into that stuff. And at the time that I looked at my bookshelf, every book had a bookmark in it, halfway, 3/4, whatever. I wasn't a fraud. I just was like, no, there's another shiny object over here.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I get it.
I just changed my attitude, and I love bookstores, but I just made myself a rule at that time: buy a book and finish it, and you can buy another book. Right. That's how it works for me, So now I have a lot more books and a lot more information, and I know how the stories end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's all helpful to me.
Oh, that's so good. I'm curious, Pat, and because what came first for you, comedy or magic? Which was your first entry?
I started as a young magician in Omaha, and I did sleight of hand, and I did cabaret, and I had I didn't have an illusion act, but I had a stand-up act with a lot of volunteers that had a sub truck at the end, and I didn't do regularly, but I did a big escape Houdini straight jacket escape over the old market in this, on the 56th anniversary of Houdini's death. That was a publicity stunt that, I kind of thought I need attention, but, but I dabbled in a lot of different things. And I think, I did eventually created original material and whatever. All of it was generally humorous because I liked comedy. I used it as a defense mechanism if something didn't work. I was able to use comedy to cover up, bad slights. Like I got advice after a magic convention from Di Vernon once, and I wanted to show him my pass. He goes, "What are you working on your pass for?" And I go, "Well, I just want to be as good as all those guys." He goes, "You don't need it." He goes, "Nobody ever looks at your hands. They don't." And I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You're so funny that we don't care. We do not care what you're doing."
Right.
Where somebody who's a real finger flinger and everyone's looking at him all the time and who's in a flop sweat, they got nothing if they can't be, seamless, bulletproof, And so I just started doing the slowest, most obnoxious pass in the world with a deck of cards. And I realized he's right. There were times in my act that I had a torn corner to a dollar bill or a playing card. It not only didn't match, it wasn't even the same
denomination.
but I would bring it up and I'd go, ta-da, and they would applaud, and I'd throw them apart on opposite sides of the stage, and it wasn't because I didn't want to. I just realized there's a gift in having some salesmanship or charisma,
How funny that there must have been a moment there where you thought what you had wasn't as good or was a negative. I just use the jokes to cover up for the bad magic when it's the opposite that the audience actually cares about, it seems like.
Right. Well, there was a great guy. Whatever his name was, I can't remember. His name was Harold T. Russell, I think.
Okay.
He was an older African-American magician in the Midwest that would come to the Midwest Magic Jubilee or the Fawcett Ross Convention or something. He was hilarious, but he was good. He was really good, sleight of hand and all that. He did a lecture with a thing where he did this routine using a thumb tip. And, there were not thumb tips made in his, skin tone.
Right. Yeah.
So but he was so good at his misdirection, his communication, his humor, and he would demonstrate it. And then he would say to everybody, "This is how it's done." And he would toss his thumb tip on the table. It was aluminum. It was a shiny aluminum thumb tip. It wasn't, flesh tone for a white guy or for an African. And we would go, "What?" And then he'd do it again. And we go, "Oh, I can't believe it. I didn't see it." There's no reason to see it. I don't act guilty. Nobody has anywhere to look,
Oh, that's fantastic.
I mean, that was a huge eye opener for me, was that confidence is king,
Right.
If you have something to say, if you have a purpose, if you know where the story's going, if you know what's happening, that kind of confidence you see in people who can pause during their routine, who can wait for a reaction, who can respond to a moment, as opposed to just quickly rattling it through and shaking things and make them look over here. And,
right. Yeah.
Quiet confidence is probably the best tool you're going to have as a performer.
Well, you see the same in stand-up with people who are hilarious, but they're just running over their jokes because they're afraid to leave any moment of silence, because they think that if the audience is ever quiet, they're failing.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I was a little bit, I don't know if anxious is the right word, or nervous, but when they asked me to come to Magic Live, which is, I guess, is that the first time that you and I met?
That is, yeah, that is.
So, that was a couple of years ago. I had not done a magic convention in 25 plus years. And I also, while I employ magic sometimes theatrically in my stories or principles or other things,
right,
I haven't really done a magic show. And this was a magic show, or at least some tricks for a magic convention.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing I do could fool anybody. I was like, these tricks are, dated, and like all of it was a disaster going into it as far as I was concerned. And I thought Stan was off his rocker. I kept saying, Stan, I don't do magic anymore. That's not my thing,
Yeah.
And I actually went to a storage unit and pulled out some stuff. Almost everything was in disrepair. Like, it was hilarious. Rubber bands that were crusty, and looking at old magic stuff is just death on a stick.
It's just the most depressing thing, isn't it? An old magic prop.
Yeah.
It's just like,
you cannot revive it. You can try to get the paint job, but it's a shut-in. It's not coming out.
We were doing a show in the Peller at the Castle last week, and a friend I was working with, he borrowed a prop that was like a vintage one of those. It was the Grant's Barrel of Plenty, where you pour out of this wooden barrel all these drinks.
Right.
But the thing was so old. He cleaned it like 20 times, but every time he poured the water out, it was rusty.
Oh my God, that's funny. So everybody had to order a rusty nail.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh well. That actually, I took it as a challenge, a little bit of a challenge, and I think I wrote some original stuff to work around some things, and then I had sold some routines. My thing with the coins over the head and the trash can lid is now, Kevin James is now the heir apparent, and he's a great steward for that particular effect, because he's working all the time, and it gets, on his feet. But he was kind enough to say, I'd like to see you do it. Why don't you go ahead and do that or whatever. So I kind of built my, return, I guess, on just digging that thing out of the ashes,
Yeah.
But it presented a series of other problems.
What's that?
How do you pick a volunteer out of an audience at a magic convention where everybody knows these tricks?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Everybody either seen or done sliding these paper balls or, whatever. And I like a challenge, right? I like a how do we solve this problem kind of thing.
Right.
And so the stuff isn't the tricks that I was proudest of. It was that moment where I was like, oh, I got to do this twice in front of 1,000 magicians,
Oh.
And do you remember what I did at that moment where I said, everybody stand up? Everybody in the auditorium stand up. If you've been in the dealer's room, if you've bought anything in the last 48 hours, sit down.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, 80% of the people sit down. If you've ever been an assistant, hit the spot, handed somebody a prop, sit down. Like, boom. In like 5 questions, I'm down to like 4 people, and even those people are suspicious,
So funny.
So, I mean, but that's how you solve a problem, right? You look at the riddle and figure it out, It turned out we ended up with a couple of really funny people that did a good job, and we were able to pull it off. And even though one woman, I don't know which show you went to, but one woman was like overly trying to be cooperative and silly, and it was a nuisance. Right?
Oh, yeah. She was trying to help, but was being completely unhelpful.
So why it was so great wasn't because of that. It's because the empathy of everybody in the audience who knows what it's like to have a bad volunteer.
Right.
They were like, oh, God, oh, help him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be this guy, right? And that's what that moment rested on was I got to just show them how I what's my people management skills?
Right.
Because that's the art of it. Now, subsequently, last year, I guess, I'd gotten a call from Richard Kaufman to do the Genie conference, which I did in the summer.
Okay.
And I just said to him, no tricks. I don't do any tricks. And he goes like, I don't care. I go, well, did you see what I did at Magic Live? He goes, no, but I heard it was great. I go, all right, but I'm not doing any tricks. Like, that's not my thing. I don't know how to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's great.
And he gave me 45 minutes of which I did a lot of nostalgic humor and did my family slideshow and whatever. And I was in a good zone, and they were very, it was great. People like Gaten Bloom, people I look up to that are comedians and whatever, were so happy that there wasn't another magic act. Like after seeing, 72 magic acts.
Right.
And I thought they were going to be disappointed. I thought they were going to be like, oh, there wasn't any tricks. But it was kind of a nice palate cleanser, and it was good for them. And I got a kind of a family reunion with a lot of funny, John Archer and, some of the British comics and, different people that I met for the first time there. It was great,
Oh, that's so good.
So I don't know. I like the allied arts. I like variety and so forth. It's just that I can't, pretend to juggle anymore at the, I can't do the stuff I used to do.
Now you stopping when you not took a break, but when you kind of shifted your career from doing, magic and the variety stuff, was that an intentional thing, or did you just start getting booked more as a writer and slowly that kind of faded away? What was that transition like for you?
You know what? It was intentional. I made a move from Omaha to California, and that was a moment of transition.
Okay.
And I thought, well, if I enter this world over here, I need to make a declaration. I'm a comedian, right?
Yeah.
So I still dabbled. Occasionally I would be at the Magic Castle or I'd be at the Comedy Magic Club because I had to get stage time for them to see me.
Right.
But as soon as I could wean myself of it, one, I didn't feel like, the tricks to me weren't the reason I was up there. I was using them, I think, to be able to do the audience interaction and to have kind of an outcome. And as I got to be a better writer and storyteller and joke writer, I started saying, I don't know if I need this. The impetus for actually setting the props down completely came from an invitation by Jerry Seinfeld. I was an opening act for him for his first special at the Roxy in LA and a few other things. And I did my tricks and I had people come, and he always loved the way I got the audience warmed up and was ready. So he was very generous with that. But we were going to Dallas, I think. And he said to me, hey, do me a favor. Do you want to just do straight stand up and just bring a garment bag, and don't worry, you're not going to lose your job. It was like a challenge, you can do the time before. And I thought, initially, he was encouraging me to be a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
What I discovered much later was he didn't want to wait for my props at the airport, right?
Oh, that's hilarious.
And it was fine. Whatever reason, it's a sugar pill, but for whatever reason, he gave me permission to spend a week only telling jokes. And then I realized, I could paint the picture. I don't have to have a Manwich can in my hand to talk about Manwich. I can, I can tell them what a sloppy Joe is and whatever. Yep. So I learned a lot from him on that. And right at that moment, he was a very buttoned down comic, with his skinny tie and his sleeves rolled up. And, he was somebody who was a guy that I looked at on the Tonight Show and went, wow, that's a real comedian,
Right.
But as I learned to do comedy, he took from me a little bit the animation of how to be a little bit more physical, how to be a little bit more laid back, how to, like, it wasn't like a handshake trade. It was just, there was an evolution for both of us,
Oh yeah. I mean, when you're hanging out with someone, you spend that time together, you're picking up things off each other and going, oh, that worked when he did that. What if I tried something like this? Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, and that eventually led to me submitting a play to Castle Rock to get one of the first writing jobs on his show. And, he liked my sensibility on some things. And, riding in the sidecar of somebody's success like that, of watching him create a television show and come up with a theme song and, develop the characters, whatever, that's graduate course work to be interfacing with a network and, a TV schedule and touring and concerts. And, so I feel like I got a very, eyewitness view of some important things that helped me decide where I wanted to be in the business. Right. So, now aside from performing, which I do regularly in Austin, I direct TV commercials, and I think there's a way for creativity to be infused in producing plays and other things. If I believe in them, I got a toolkit for it,
Yeah, that's great.
And I would say that for anybody who's only a performer or only whatever, I would look at it as the thing to fall back on. Like that to me is a little bit of a flaw.
Yeah.
That you've got to have some insurance policy that when you're no longer performing, you better be able to be an accountant,
Right. Right.
But I think thinking about what to fall forward on is very important, right?
That's good.
If you're an ice dancer, your career is limited. At some age, you can't do the lift or you can't do the spin or whatever. So are you going to be a coach? Are you going to be, Like you have to decide what your future path is.
Yep.
And because I always had producing skills, I produced my own events and stuff. I realized that's what magic taught me. Being a magician, while an entertaining medium, really most magicians are producers, because you have every part of show business is
in one thing.
Yeah, right. You got to come up with a costume. You got to fix your props. You got to write your script. You got to, whatever it is. You have to figure out the logistics of travel to this thing. So, you're poised to put on somebody else's show, because you usually have a skill set that's much broader. Like an actor only worries about the script, their performance, right?
Right.
Costumer only worries about the costume. You know what I mean? But, we have to do so many different things, to accomplish a magic show,
Yep.
And not everybody has every one of those, skills down pat, but you end up having to learn them all,
Yeah, and a lot of people are thinking, well, I only learned that so I can do this show, but like you're saying, that sets you up to do some other things that you might enjoy as well.
Yeah. I mean, I love brainstorming theatrical solutions with a magic mindset, right?
Right.
So in my very first play, Bunk Bed Brothers, I had these two brothers in their old childhood bedroom as grown-ups, and regressing and playing and sort of, competing for their parents' affection and all that. But they were really opposites, kind of an odd couple thing, and they never got along, except when they regressed to something they did in their childhood, some behavior, whether it was a Nerf basketball game or acting out a sound effects record or whatever. That was in their DNA, and that's what they remembered. So watching 35-year-old men, with their underwear on their head, pretending to do the opening from the Sea Hunt TV show or whatever it was, that's when the audience really came alive every time that happened. Right? So I decided that they shared a common interest in being an astronaut when they were a kid, because for my age, that was a big thing. That was like, to be an astronaut was a big thing. And so I created that connection for them. And then I decided to end the show with a kind of a communication over two old walkie-talkies they find, and one's on the top bunk and one's sitting down at the desk. And it's like somebody's on the moon talking to Houston, right?
Right.
The room begins to go dark. The top bunk blasts off, and it's a levitation.
That's so cool.
Out of bunk. There's smoke blowing out of it, and the guy's sitting up there and with a flashlight, and he shines it on the desk where there's a globe.
Yeah.
So he can see the Earth, and he's describing it as a big blue marble over Houston, and the other one is like, tell us what it's like up there, whatever. And never during the show do you ever see these two guys being sentimental or being connected like you do in these last few moments of the play, right?
Oh, that's great.
And as that bunk floats up, the back's, curtain is a field of stars. And, and then John F. Kennedy's voice comes on and it says, why some say the moon, why does Rice play Texas? Why do we do this? Whatever. Because we can, Right. And the powerful words of JFK put into a theatrical situation with this tableau makes it drama. And it makes the kind of drama that when we take the bow and we come out to the lobby, the audience says, I owe my brother a call.
Wow.
And that's so much different
Yeah.
than getting applause and we laugh and they forget about it.
Yeah.
Or I got to bring my family to this show because I owe somebody an apology or whatever it is. Right.
Oh, that's so much better than a magician going, your pass was great.
I know, but isn't it funny? It's the same idea, and people have done it well in our business, right?
Right.
If you could take magic, and I'm using magic to think theatrically, right?
Right.
But in magic, if you're telling a story, and there were many early David Copperfield routines that were romantic and whatever, and you make people feel an emotion, you have a whole different idea. There's something that's take home, right? There's something about your world that's different. It's not presentational, right? It's visceral, And I think that that's what, most of the people that we see that we like or that continue to perform they're able to get to connect on a deeper level. And musicians have it the best. Music carries emotion that is different than lyrics, and lyrics can say something. It all just elevates and amplifies feelings, right?
Right.
But I believe most arts, the ability is there, and you get the advantage of using music and using lights and using sound effects and using a trick, to do more than fool people, because it's fun to be fooled, but it also feels kind of it's like bully mentality.
Exactly.
I fooled you.
Yeah.
You're an idiot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. What Seinfeld said, here's a quarter. Now it's gone. You're a jerk.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's well put. So, that attitude is, that's the ego driven performer. Right.
Right. But again, it goes back to what you were saying. You're not going in there going, what can I take away from people? It's what can I give to them?
Yeah. And believe me, they're giving you back. They're giving you, right. we are, and this, I think maybe, to circle back around to our, how do we behave in a pandemic lifestyle?
Right.
What people are feeling, yes, there's a loss of money, but all of those other things that we're treated to, which is, a response, applause, a review, social interaction where people, immediately feel like they know you, all of that stuff, those are sort of the charms of this business.
Right.
And, you start to feel it all drift away, but it's much more that exists one way or the other, but it really more is, is there a love of self? Are you doing something for other people? Are you know what I mean? As opposed to looking for approval, because when the approval isn't there and you don't feel great about it, the absence is within. It's not, this is much bigger psychology, but I feel like there are some major celebrities that exist because they're desperate to have the approval of their parent or their sibling, or and then as the classic Hollywood story goes, they're suddenly, on the down and they're drinking or this thing or the river. It's because they have an internal, light that's turned off, and I just think if there's anything we can take away from this new normal, it's stop looking down to your phone for answers, right? Look further inside, look up more at the sky, right? Take your ability to make art, the desire to create things and take control of it, right? That's when we feel in control is when we feel the most powerful.
Oh, it's so good.
This has really been a good conversation for me. I know I'm talking to myself more than other people in some ways. But
no, this is great, Pat. I am so encouraged. I know that everyone who's listening is really encouraged as well. And I think the timing could not be better for this conversation to be out there. So I'm so grateful to you. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing with all of us.
Well, it's great. I think we can all learn from sharing. We might be social distancing for a moment, but there's not really an app for a hug, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have to get back to the human to human, how can we help our neighbor, golden rule stuff.
Yeah.
That's going to survive it all,
Oh, it's so good. That's so good. Well, Pat, how can people follow along on your journey and see what you've got going on and see you when you do come to town next?
Well, I have I got a website, which is a company website, which is sweetwoodiscreative.com. And I'm a Facebook guy, which I generally announce where I'm going and so forth. But I've kind of drifted off, even though I have Twitter and Instagram or whatever. I've kind of started to, not be so. I'm more of a anti-social media person, just because I find it crowds. It's kind of like a box of Christmas gifts every day that you got to wade through before you get to work. And I'm trying to put myself on a little more of a governor of more creating and less
consuming.
Yeah, consuming is really exhausting. It's really unsatisfying.
Yeah.
But creating, and listen, I would encourage anybody that if you can create for others to consume, you're on the better side of that recipe.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, in general, I fly under the radar because I don't look at myself as competing with my fellow people. I feel like I've got two things to do: to run a faster race, against my own best time, and against my last project. Can
great.
I find something new to inspire me and lose sleep over that? That's what I like to do. Once you kind of grasp on it, it's pretty easy to fly then.
That's perfect. Well, you've definitely inspired me today, and I know you're inspired everyone listening. Thank you so much, Pat. I really,
all right.
Really
well, I
appreciate
apologize for stealing everybody's time, but I think that most of them are out of work at the moment.